What the fuck would you do? No, seriously. Stop scrolling and think about it for a second. You're at Grand Central Terminal during the goddamn apocalypse of rush hour. You have exactly 45 seconds to catch the last train that gets you to the interview. Not just any interview. This is the one. The one that yanks you and your family out of the gutter. The one that stops the eviction notices. The one that finally lets you breathe. And then you see him. A fossil of a man, crumpled on a bench like a discarded newspaper, clutching his chest, his face the color of old cement. His breath is a wet, ragged sound, a death rattle in the making. Thousands of people are streaming past him, a river of humanity so focused on their own bullshit they wouldn't notice if the guy spontaneously combusted. They're zombies, plugged into their phones, their lattes, their own self-importance. But you see him. Your train screeches. The doors are about to close. 30 seconds. This interview is your salvation. Miss it, and it's back to dumpster diving for hope. The old man's eyes, pale blue and terrified, lock onto yours. A single word escapes his lips, a ghost of a sound. Please. What do? Do you save yourself? Or do you save the dying stranger who could be worth absolutely nothing? Before you answer, let me tell you about Amelia Rossi. And if you think you know how this story ends, I promise you don't have a fucking clue. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell, because the choice Amelia made that day, it didn't just change her life. It exposed a secret so massive it would shake the very foundations of New York City. 4:30 a.m. The alarm was a shriek in the suffocating darkness of Amelia Mia Rossi's tiny Queens apartment. It was the sound of another day she had to survive. She slid out of the lumpy mattress on the floor, her movements practiced and silent, careful not to wake her younger brother, Leo, who was asleep on the ancient, sagging couch that served as his bed. The floorboards groaned a protest under her bare feet as she crept to the bathroom. The face in the cracked mirror was a stranger she knew too well. The dark circles under her eyes weren't just from lack of sleep. They were bruises left by a life that had been punching down for years. She was working 2 soul-crushing jobs, barely keeping their heads above the filthy water of poverty. But today, Mia forced a smile that felt like a grimace. Today was different. Today was the day she might finally learn to swim. By 5:15, she was a ghost, moving through the empty pre-dawn streets, the air thick with the smell of damp pavement and distant garbage trucks. The city was stirring, a monster slowly opening its eyes. She pushed through the greasy glass door of the Daily Grind Cafe, the little bell above her head tinkling a sad, familiar tune. "Morning, sunshine?" Sal, the cook, bellowed from behind the grill, his sweat-stained bandana already plastered to his forehead. He was a good man, trapped in the same greasy cycle she was. "Morning, Sal." Mia tied the faded, perpetually coffee-stained apron around her waist and grabbed a pot of coffee. For the next 6 hours, she would be a machine of smiles and service, a receptacle for whatever spare change and pity the breakfast rush was willing to toss her way. The clientele at the Daily Grind weren't the generous types. They were construction workers with calloused hands and tired eyes, grabbing coffee and a buttered roll before heading off to build a city they could never afford to live in. They were low-level office workers, their cheap suits smelling of desperation, barking into their phones as they rushed through their orders. When her shift finally ended at 11 a.m., Mia flattened the crumpled bills on the counter and counted her earnings. $27.54. She stared at the pathetic pile of cash. Rent was due Friday. The electric company was threatening to shut them off again. And Leo, her brilliant, beautiful brother, was waiting for money to buy a single, outrageously expensive chemistry textbook he needed for his community college class. $27 for 6 hours of thankless labor. Mia felt that old, familiar serpent of anxiety coil in her stomach, a creature that never slept. No matter how hard she ran, she was always standing still, just one broken bone or one missed shift away from total disaster. Walking home, she passed the gleaming, arrogant spire of the Sterling Dynamics building. It clawed its way into the Manhattan skyline, a monument of glass and steel that screamed power and wealth. She'd walked this path 1,000 times, watching the impeccably dressed men and women glide through its revolving doors with an air of effortless belonging. They were a different species, inhabiting a world where $27 was a rounding error on a lunch receipt, not the razor-thin line between eating and going hungry. Back in the apartment, Leo was hunched over his beat-up laptop at their wobbly kitchen table, surrounded by a fortress of library books. He was trying to piece together an education from borrowed, outdated scraps. "How was work?" he asked, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Great," Mia lied, forcing a brightness into her voice that felt like swallowing glass. "Made a killing. What's the subject today?" "Organic chemistry. Got a midterm that's going to be a real beast." Leo finally looked up, and for a second, Mia saw their mother's eyes staring back at her. The same fierce intelligence, the same stubborn hope that tomorrow had to be better than today. Their parents had been taken from them 4 years ago, victims of a drunk driver in a rusty pickup truck. In an instant, it was just the two of them against the world. Mia, then 19, had dropped out of community college without a second thought, trading her own dreams for the brutal reality of full-time work. Leo's future became her singular, all-consuming mission. "I found a new scholarship application," Leo said, a flicker of excitement in his voice. "The Sterling Foundation. Full ride to MIT if I get it, but the application requires a formal interview." His face fell. "And I need a suit." Mia's heart felt like a lead weight in her chest. A suit. Of course, everything, every single step forward, required a toll they couldn't pay. "How much?" she asked, already knowing the answer was too much. "I saw one at a thrift store down on Jamaica Ave. $60. I know we don't have it, but we'll figure it out," she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She had absolutely no idea how. Just then, her cheap burner phone vibrated against the tabletop. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Probably another bill collector. But something made her answer. "Hello? Is this Amelia Rossi?" The voice was crisp, professional, female. "Yes, this is she. This is Catherine from Apex Solutions. We received your online application for the administrative assistant position. Are you available for an interview this afternoon at 3 p.m.? Mia's entire world stopped. Apex Solutions, a subsidiary of Sterling Dynamics. She'd fired off a desperate Hail Mary application 3 weeks ago and assumed it had been swallowed by the corporate void. "Yes," she managed to say, her voice a squeak. "Absolutely, I'll be there." "Excellent. The address is 1 Sterling Plaza, 45th floor. Please bring a copy of your resume and arrive 15 minutes early." After she hung up, Mia stared at her phone, her hand trembling. This was it. The life raft. The administrative position paid $65,000 a year. With benefits, health insurance, paid vacation. It was a king's ransom, an amount of money so vast she couldn't even properly imagine it. Leo was staring at her, his chemistry textbook forgotten. "What was that?" "I got an interview, today, at Apex Solutions." "Apex?" "Mia, that's part of Sterling Dynamics. That's huge. They're one of the biggest investment firms on the planet." "I know." Her mind was already racing, the numbers clicking into place like a slot machine. 65 grand a year meant Leo could have his suit. They could get a real apartment, one where he didn't have to sleep in the living room. Maybe, just maybe, she could stop feeling the constant, grinding terror of being one paycheck away from the street. But first, she had to get there. Mia dumped the contents of her wallet onto the table. Her $27.54 from tips, plus the $16 she had squirreled away from her night job cleaning offices. $43.54. That was her entire net worth. A round-trip ticket on the Lear to Grand Central was $21. She'd need to look presentable, maybe buy a coffee to sip on, so she didn't pass out from hunger, since she hadn't eaten since yesterday. Every cent was a calculation, a tiny piece of a fragile puzzle. She looked at Leo, his face a mixture of hope and worry, bent over his borrowed books with a second-hand calculator. Everything she had worked for, every ounce of her soul she had sold for minimum wage since their parents died, it all came down to this single moment. This interview wasn't about a desk job. It was about redemption. It was about proving that all the 16-hour days, all the nights she'd gone to bed with a hollow ache in her stomach so Leo could eat, all the deferred dreams and silent tears, that it was all worth something. Mia grabbed her purse and the crisp, clean copy of the resume she'd printed at the library weeks ago. She pulled her shoulders back, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel, and headed for the door. "Wish me luck," she said over her shoulder. "You don't need luck, sis," Leo called back. "You're a warrior." As she walked toward the train station, Mia allowed herself a dangerous indulgence. She imagined a different future, a future where the mail wasn't a source of fear, where Leo could go to MIT and unleash the genius she knew he possessed, where she could walk into a building like Sterling Plaza and feel like she belonged. But she had no idea that her understanding of luck, of fate, of the entire goddamn universe was about to be irrevocably, violently shattered. The confused old man on the bench was about to cost Mia Rossi everything she'd ever worked for, and in doing so, give her more than she could ever imagine. Grand Central Terminal was a symphony of controlled chaos. Thousands of bodies flowed through the main concourse, a relentless tide of purpose and ambition. Everyone was going somewhere important. Mia clutched her resume folder to her chest like a shield and checked her phone. 2:35 p.m. Perfect. The 2:40 express would get her to Midtown with just enough time to find a bathroom, check her teeth, and mentally prepare. She'd spent the $21 on the train ticket, leaving her with $22.54. Enough for a bottle of water after the interview. Maybe a protein bar if she was lucky. Her stomach twisted into a tight knot, a visceral reminder that her last meal had been a piece of dry toast 20 hours ago. None of it mattered. This interview was the finish line. As she navigated the crowd towards Platform 22, the grand arched windows of the terminal suddenly darkened. The sky outside had turned a bruised, angry purple. The weather forecast had been clear, but New York weather played by its own rules. A single drop of rain splattered on her forehead, then another. Within seconds, the heavens opened up in a furious biblical downpour. People shrieked and scattered, dashing for the cover of the station's overhangs. Maya pulled her thin, worn jacket tighter around her shoulders and hurried toward the boarding area. The train was already there, its silver cars gleaming under the station lights, passengers funneling through the open doors. And that's when she saw him. He was an old man, sitting alone on a polished wooden bench, a statue of stillness amidst the swirling chaos. The rain, now blowing in through the open archways, was soaking the shoulders of his ridiculously expensive-looking cashmere coat, but he didn't seem to notice. His silver hair was plastered to his skull, and his liver-spotted hands gripped an old, monogrammed leather briefcase with a death grip. The initials were embossed in gold. A.S. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Mia slowed her pace, her eyes locked on him. The man's gaze was unfocused, staring into the middle distance but seeing nothing. His lips moved, but no sound came out, as if he were trying to grasp a thought that kept slipping through his fingers. "All aboard! Final call for the 240 Express to Manhattan!" The conductor's voice boomed through the station. Mia's head snapped toward the train. The doors were beginning to slide shut. She had 30 seconds, maybe less. The old man tried to push himself to his feet, but his legs wobbled beneath him. He swayed dangerously. His face, already pale, had gone a ghastly, ashen gray. He pressed a hand to his chest, his breathing becoming shallow, panicked gasps. "Sir!" Mia called out, but her voice was swallowed by the roar of the station. 20 seconds. The man's hand clutched tighter at the fabric over his heart. His eyes, wide with a terror that felt ancient and absolute, finally found hers across the platform. It was a look that bypassed all the noise and chaos and stabbed directly into her soul. He was trying to speak, to form a word, but all that came out was a strangled croak. 15 seconds. "Please." The word was a whisper, a prayer carried on his last breath, but Mia heard it as clearly as if he'd screamed it in her ear. "Help. Me." 10 seconds. The world seemed to slow down, the frantic sounds of the station fading into a dull roar. Mia looked at the train, the gap in its doors shrinking, a closing window on her entire future. Then she looked back at the old man, who was now gripping the bench with white-knuckled hands, as if it were the only thing anchoring him to the earth. His breathing was a desperate, failing engine. The interview? $65,000. Leo's suit. Leo's future. An apartment with heat. Everything. 5 seconds. The conductor raised his hand. The final signal. Mia dropped her resume folder. The carefully printed pages scattered across the wet floor. She didn't even notice. She ran. "Sir! Sir, stay with me!" She knelt beside him just as the train behind her gave a final hiss and began to pull away, taking her one chance at a better life with it. Up close, the scene was worse. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead, mingling with the rain. His expensive watch and perfectly tailored suit spoke of a life of immense wealth. But in that moment, he was just a terrified, vulnerable human being. "My chest," he whispered, his voice a thread. Can't breathe." Mia's hands were shaking so badly she could barely unlock her phone. "I'm calling for help. Just try to stay calm, okay? 911, what is your emergency?" "I'm at Grand Central Terminal, platform 22. There's an elderly man. He's having severe chest pains. He's conscious, but he can barely breathe. We need an ambulance right now." While she relayed the information to the dispatcher, Mia's instincts took over. She carefully loosened the man's silk tie and unbuttoned the collar of his shirt. His skin was cold and clammy to the touch, his pulse a frantic, thready bird beating against her fingertips. "What's your name, sir?" she asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Arthur," he managed to gasp. "Arthur, I can't remember. I was supposed to meet someone." "It's okay, Arthur. Help is on the way. My name is Mia. I'm not going to leave you." Arthur's grip on his briefcase tightened. Even through the fog of pain and confusion, his posture remained strangely formal, the bearing of a man used to being in command. When he spoke, even through the gasps, his words were clipped, educated, the cadence of a man who had spent a lifetime in boardrooms. "The meeting." Arthur's eyes darted frantically toward the distant midtown skyline, a jagged row of glass teeth biting into the storm clouds. "They're waiting. It's important." Mia followed his gaze. Among the countless skyscrapers, one stood taller, prouder than the rest. The Sterling Dynamics Tower. The same building she passed every day. But Arthur's attention seemed fixed in that direction, his confusion warring with a desperate sense of urgency. "Don't worry about any meetings right now, Arthur," Mia said, her voice soft but firm. "Just focus on breathing for me, in and out. That's it." In the distance, the first wail of a siren cut through the city's noise. The ambulance was close, but Arthur's condition seemed to be deteriorating by the second. His face had taken on a bluish tint, and his grip on her hand was weakening. "Please," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "Don't leave me alone." Mia's phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. It was them. Apex Solutions. Wondering where the hell she was. Her interview was supposed to start in 10 minutes. She could still make it. If she just left now, told the paramedics where to find him and ran for the next train, she could still save her own life. But looking into Arthur's terrified eyes, she knew there was only one choice she could live with for the rest of hers. She declined the call and squeezed his hand tighter. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. What Mia didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that her decision to stay, to sacrifice her own future for a stranger's, had just set in motion a chain of events that would alter not just her life, but the entire power structure of the city. Because Arthur wasn't just some confused old man caught in the rain. He was about to become the most important person she had ever saved. And as she knelt there on the cold, wet platform, she had no idea that a teenager across the way, bored while waiting for his train, was filming the entire thing on his phone. The paramedics arrived in a storm of their own, their red and blue lights painting the gray afternoon in strobing flashes of urgency. 2 EMTs, a man and a woman, rushed toward them with a stretcher and a cascade of medical bags. "What do we have?" asked the lead paramedic, a woman in her 40s with calm, competent eyes. "Chest pains, severe difficulty breathing, confusion," Mia reported, her voice clear and concise. "His name is Arthur. He was disoriented when I found him." Arthur clung to Mia's hand as the paramedics swarmed around him, their movements a blur of practiced efficiency. His grip was astonishingly strong for a man in his condition. "Arthur, my name is Maria. We're going to take very good care of you," the paramedic said, skillfully wrapping a blood pressure cuff around his arm. "Can you tell me your last name?" Arthur's eyes darted between the medical team and Mia, a fresh wave of panic washing over his face. I don't... The meeting..." "It's okay," Mia said softly, her presence a steady anchor in his storm of confusion. "Just let them help you." "BP is through the roof but holding," Maria announced to her partner. "Pulse is tacky. Let's get him on a 12 lead and push some nitro. We need to get him to Mount Sinai now." As they prepared to move Arthur onto the stretcher, he refused to let go of Mia's hand. "Please," he whispered, his voice thin and reedy, "don't leave." Mia looked at the paramedics, her own desperation rising. Can I ride with him?" "Are you family?" Maria asked, not unkindly. "No," Mia admitted, "but I think I'm all he has right now." Maria gave a short, decisive nod. "Get in." Just as they were loading him into the back of the ambulance, Mia's phone rang again. Apex Solutions. She stared at the screen, the name a symbol of the life that was now evaporating before her eyes. They were calling to officially rescind the offer, to tell her she'd blown her one and only chance. With a final, decisive tap, she declined the call and climbed into the ambulance, the doors slamming shut behind her, sealing her fate. The ride to Mount Sinai Hospital was a surreal nightmare of wailing sirens, the acrid smell of rubbing alcohol, and Arthur's ragged, labored breathing. Mia held his cold hand, whispering words of reassurance she didn't feel herself. "Stay with me, Arthur. You're going to be okay. We're almost there." Through the grimy window of the ambulance, she watched the city streak by. Somewhere in one of those glass and steel canyons, her interview was supposed to be happening. Someone else was sitting in that chair, confidently answering questions about their 5-year plan, their skills, their dreams. But as she looked at Arthur's frightened, vulnerable face, a strange sense of peace settled over her. She had made the right choice. It was a costly choice, a devastating choice. But it was the right one. At the hospital, the emergency room descended upon them like a whirlwind. Arthur was whisked away through a set of double doors, while Mia was left behind in the sterile, impersonal waiting area. She sank into a hard plastic chair that had witnessed a million private tragedies. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous, soul-crushing tune, and the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and fear. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen. 3 missed calls from Apex Solutions. A part of her knew she should call them back, try to explain the unexplainable, beg for another chance. But what could she possibly say? "Sorry I missed the most important interview of my life, but I was busy saving a stranger who was having a heart attack. They would think she was either lying or insane." An hour bled into 2. Finally, a doctor in blue scrubs emerged from the emergency room, his face etched with fatigue. "Are you here with Arthur?" Mia shot to her feet. "Yes. Is he okay?" "He's stable," the doctor said, a small smile touching his lips. "It wasn't a heart attack, thank God. It appears to have been a severe anxiety-induced cardiac event, complicated by dehydration and an adverse reaction to some new medication he's on. His memory is returning and his vitals have normalized. He's a very lucky man." Relief washed through Mia so intensely her knees felt weak. "Can I see him?" "He's been asking for you." Arthur looked like a different person when she entered his private room. The terrifying gray pallor was gone, replaced by a healthy color in his cheeks. His eyes were clear and sharp, and he was sitting up in bed, looking less like a patient and more like a king holding court from his throne. "There she is," he said, his voice deep and resonant, completely different from the reedy whisper at the station. "My guardian angel." "How are you feeling?" Mia asked, approaching the bed. "A great deal better, thanks to you," Arthur said, studying her face with an unnerving intensity. "You saved my life. You know that, don't you?" "Anyone would have done the same thing," Mia mumbled, feeling uncomfortable under his direct gaze. "No," Arthur said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "They wouldn't have. I sat on that bench for 10 minutes while my world was coming apart. I watched dozens, maybe hundreds of people walk right past me. They looked through me like I was a ghost. But you stopped. You sacrificed something important to help a complete stranger." Mia shifted on her feet. "I just did what felt right." "What was it?" Arthur asked, his eyes boring into hers. "What was so important that you almost didn't stop?" The question hung in the air between them. Mia looked down at her hands, still clutching the damp, ruined resume folder. "A job interview," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "For an administrative assistant position. It would have changed everything for my brother and me." Arthur's expression softened, but his eyes grew even more serious. "And you missed it?" "I'm pretty sure I did. They were expecting me over 2 hours ago." "What was the company?" "Apex Solutions. I know it's not much, but the salary was more than I've ever made in a year, and my brother needs textbooks and a suit for his own—" "Apex Solutions?" Arthur interrupted, his voice sharp. He sat up straighter in the bed. "You know it?" Mia asked, confused by his reaction. Before he could answer, the door to the room flew open, and a man in his late 40s, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Mia's annual income, rushed in. He had the same piercing blue eyes as Arthur, and carried himself with an aura of unapologetic power. "Dad, thank God. When your driver called and said you never showed up for the meeting, we feared the worst." "Julian," Arthur said, relief flooding his face. "I'm all right. This young woman, she saved my life." Julian turned his attention to Mia, his expression shifting from frantic worry to sincere gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you. When my father didn't arrive for the board meeting, we had the entire NYPD looking for him. His new heart medication has been causing these spells of confusion." "Board meeting?" Mia's mind was struggling to connect the dots. Arthur, the confused old man, was on his way to a board meeting? "The Sterling Vanguard merger," Arthur said suddenly, his memory now firing on all cylinders. "We were supposed to finalize the acquisition today." "It's handled, Dad," Julian said reassuringly. "We postponed everything the moment we knew you were missing." Sterling. The name hit Mia like a physical blow. The Sterling Foundation. The Sterling Vanguard merger. The Sterling Dynamics Tower. She looked from Arthur to Julian, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Sterling?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Sterling Dynamics," Julian explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "My father founded the company 50 years ago. He's chairman emeritus now, but he still oversees all major acquisitions." The room felt like it was tilting on its axis. Sterling Dynamics, the company whose subsidiary she was supposed to interview with. The building she walked past every day, dreaming of a life she could never have. This man, Arthur Sterling, wasn't just wealthy, he was a titan, a legend, and she had found him helpless and alone on a bench at Grand Central. Arthur was watching her reaction, a knowing look in his eyes. "You mentioned your interview was with Apex Solutions." "Yes, but—" "Apex Solutions is our global investment subsidiary," Arthur said gently. "It's part of Sterling Dynamics. Mia felt the air leave her lungs. She had saved the founder of the very company where she had just thrown away her only chance at a real job. The man whose name was etched onto buildings all over the city, whose net worth was probably more than the GDP of a small country, had been at her mercy, and she had chosen to help him instead of herself. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Of course you didn't," Arthur said, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips. "And that's precisely what makes what you did so damn remarkable." Julian stepped forward. "What's your name?" "Amelia Rossi." "Amelia," Arthur said, the name rolling off his tongue as if he were tasting it. "Do you have somewhere you need to be? Because I would very much like to thank you properly for saving my life." Mia thought about her empty apartment, about Leo, waiting to hear the news that would break his heart, about the $22 in her pocket and the rent that was due. "No," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I have nowhere else to be." Arthur Sterling smiled, and for the first time since she'd found him, Mia saw the predator behind the kind eyes. She saw the man who had built an empire from scratch. "Good," he said, his voice laced with iron, "because this conversation is just getting started." The taxi ride back to Queens cost $35. Mia watched the meter with a detached sense of horror, knowing it represented more than she'd earned in an entire day. But Arthur's son, Julian, had been insistent, pressing $200 bills into her hand and overriding her protests with the quiet, unshakable authority of the ultra-rich. As the glittering skyline of Manhattan receded behind her, a mirage of a life she'd almost touched, the full, crushing weight of the day descended upon her. She had saved a billionaire's life, a decent, moral, human thing to do. And in doing so, she had torched her own future and Leo's to the ground. Her phone vibrated. A text from Leo. "How'd it go? Did you crush it?" Mia stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keypad. How do you possibly explain this? How do you tell the person you love most in the world that you chose the life of a random stranger over a secure future for both of you? She typed back a simple, cowardly reply. Hit some snags. I'll tell you when I get home. When she walked into their cramped apartment, Leo was pacing the small patch of floor between the couch and the kitchen table, his face alight with nervous energy. So? He burst out, unable to contain himself. Did you get it? When do you start? Mia sank onto the edge of the couch, the springs groaning in protest. I didn't make it to the interview, Leo. The hope drained from his face, replaced by a look of confusion and hurt. What? What happened? Did the train break down? There was an emergency, she said, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. An old man on the platform at Grand Central. He was having some kind of attack, chest pains. I had to help him. To his credit, Leo's first question was, Is he okay? He's fine now, she said. But I missed the interview. They called 3 times. I'm sure they gave the job to the next person on the list. Leo sat down next to her, and without a word, took her hand. His was warm and steady. You did the right thing, Mia. There will be other jobs. His unwavering faith in her was like a knife in her gut. If only he knew. Opportunities like that didn't come around twice, not for people like them. Later that night, long after Leo had gone to sleep, Mia was sorting their laundry at the 24-hour laundromat down the block, the air thick with the smell of bleach and fabric softener. She finally pulled Arthur Sterling's business card from her pocket. She had been too overwhelmed in the hospital to give it more than a passing glance. The card was made of a thick, heavy stock, the letters embossed in a deep, metallic gold. Arthur Sterling, Chairman Emeritus, Sterling Dynamics. Below the name was a phone number with no area code and a personal email address. It was the kind of card that didn't just give you contact information. It conferred status. She thought about what the doctor had said, an adverse reaction to a new medication. She thought about his son, Julian, the talk of a board meeting, a merger. A name had been mentioned. Vanguard. On a whim, she pulled out her phone and, using the laundromat's spotty public Wi-Fi, typed Arthur Sterling Vanguard merger into the search bar. The page took forever to load. But when it did, Mia felt the breath catch in her throat. The headlines were stunning. Sterling Dynamics in final stages of $2 billion Vanguard Tech acquisition. Arthur Sterling poised to close biggest deal of his career. Merger vote scheduled for this afternoon. This afternoon. The meeting he had been on his way to. The one he'd missed because he was collapsed on a bench, fighting for his life. Her phone vibrated again, a text message from an unknown number. Her blood ran cold, thinking it was a bill collector. But it wasn't. Amelia? This is Arthur Sterling. I trust Julian's driver got you home safely. Sleep well. Tomorrow is going to be a very, very interesting day. Mia stared at the screen, then back at the business card in her hand. Who exactly had she saved today? What kind of forces had she unwittingly set into motion? Walking into that lobby tomorrow, she had a terrifying premonition that her life, the small, predictable, difficult life she knew, was already over. Friday morning dawned gray and oppressive, the sky the color of dirty dishwater. Mia hadn't slept. Arthur Sterling's cryptic text message had replayed in her mind all night. A promise and a threat rolled into one. She'd spent hours online, falling down the rabbit hole of Sterling Dynamics. The company wasn't just big. It was a global leviathan, with tentacles in finance, technology, and real estate across the world. And at its very center was Arthur Sterling, a man described by the financial press as part reclusive genius, part ruthless predator. At precisely 10 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Amelia Rossi? It was Catherine, the woman from Apex Solutions. Mia's heart plummeted. Here it was, the official thanks but no thanks. Yes, this is she, Mia said, bracing for the impact. Listen, I am so incredibly sorry about yesterday. There was an unavoidable medical emergency. Actually, Catherine cut in, her voice strangely cheerful. We'd like to reschedule. Mr. Sterling's office has specifically requested it. Are you available this afternoon at 2 p.m.? Mia almost dropped the phone. Mr. Sterling's office. Today? Yes, of course, absolutely. Wonderful. Same place. Warren Sterling Plaza, 45th floor. We'll see you then. After hanging up, Mia stared at her reflection in the darkened screen of her phone. This was happening. He had intervened. He was giving her a second chance. By 1:30 p.m., she stood on the sidewalk across from One Sterling Plaza. She had walked past this building thousands of times, but she had never truly seen it. It was less a building and more a declaration of war against the sky, a gleaming weapon of ambition. The lobby was a cavern of polished marble and hushed reverence. It smelled of money and power. And then she saw it. Lining one entire wall was a gallery of portraits, a visual history of the company. Founders, CEOs, titans of industry. But it was the largest portrait, the one hanging in the center, that made her blood turn to ice. Arthur Sterling, founder, 1972, chairman emeritus. It was him, the same piercing blue eyes, the same silver hair, the same hint of a smile she had seen in the hospital bed. But in the portrait he was younger, radiating an aura of absolute, indomitable confidence. The man who had built this empire from nothing. The man she had found crumpled and terrified on a bench. The sheer, cosmic absurdity of it all hit her like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of the marble reception desk to steady herself. Miss Rossi? A woman with a warm smile and a clipboard approached her. It was Catherine. I'm so glad you could make it. How are you feeling after your emergency yesterday? I'm fine, thank you, Mia managed, her gaze still fixed on Arthur's portrait. That's our founder, Catherine said, following her line of sight. A remarkable man. Built this company from a 2-room office in the garment district. He still comes in to oversee the big picture. He seems familiar, Mia said weakly. Let's head up, Catherine said, oblivious to the earthquake happening inside Mia's head. I think you'll find today's interview process is a little unorthodox. They rode a silent, high-speed elevator to the 45th floor. But instead of leading her to a sterile conference room or an HR cubicle, Catherine guided her down a long, plushly carpeted hallway toward a massive set of double doors at the very end. There's been a slight change in the agenda, Catherine explained, as she knocked softly. Someone specifically requested to meet with you personally. She opened the door, and Mia's world tilted on its axis. It was the penthouse office, a space so large her entire apartment could fit in it 10 times over. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a godlike view of the city, and sitting behind an enormous mahogany desk that looked like it had been carved from a single ancient tree was Arthur Sterling. He looked healthy, vital, and impossibly powerful in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His son, Julian, stood beside him, a warm smile on his face. There she is, Arthur said, his voice booming with a warmth that filled the cavernous room. My guardian angel. He rose from his chair. Catherine stared, her professional composure finally cracking. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. Do you two know each other? Arthur chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. Know each other? Catherine, allow me to introduce you to Amelia Rossi. She's the remarkable young woman who saved my life yesterday. The words detonated in the quiet office. Catherine's eyes went wide. You're the one? The woman who helped Mr. Sterling at Grand Central?" "It was at the station," Mia said quietly, feeling like she was in a dream. "He was having chest pains. Chest pains brought on by a perfect storm of stress and a bad reaction to my new heart medication," Arthur explained, walking around the desk to stand beside her. "I'd gone for a walk to clear my head before the final board meeting on the Vanguard acquisition. The medication made me disoriented, and the stress of the $2 billion deal triggered what the doctors are calling an anxiety-induced cardiac event." Julian stepped forward. "My father was carrying the final signed merger documents in his briefcase when Amelia found him. If he had collapsed alone, if those documents had been lost, we could have lost the single biggest acquisition in our company's 50-year history." The room spun. $2 billion. She had inadvertently saved a deal worth $2 billion. "But more importantly," Arthur continued, his voice dropping, his gaze fixed on Mia, "Amelia didn't know any of that. When she stopped to help me, she didn't see a CEO or a billionaire. She saw a scared, confused old man who needed help. And she sacrificed her own job interview to make sure I was safe." "Your job interview?" Catherine's voice was a shocked whisper. "The interview you missed yesterday was for an administrative position here at Apex Solutions, our subsidiary," Arthur confirmed. "Amelia was rushing to an interview at the very company I founded. She gave up her only chance to work here in order to save my life, without having a clue who I was. The irony was so thick, so potent, it was suffocating. Mia had sacrificed her dream of working for Sterling Dynamics to save the man who had built Sterling Dynamics. She had chosen kindness over ambition, humanity over opportunity, and she had done it completely blind." I think I need to sit down," Mia whispered. Arthur guided her to a plush leather chair, his expression gentle but deadly serious. "Amelia, yesterday, when I was at my most vulnerable, you didn't see a position or a title. You saw a person. That tells me everything I will ever need to know about your character." "I still can't believe this is real, that you're really him." "I am," Arthur said, "and you are about to discover that every now and then, the universe has a way of rewarding people who choose to do the right thing when no one is watching." He returned to his desk and picked up a thick file folder. "Catherine, would you mind giving us a few minutes of privacy? Amelia and I have some rather important matters to discuss." As Catherine quietly exited the office, closing the heavy doors behind her, Arthur's expression grew even more intense. "Now then," he said, settling back into his throne-like chair, "let's talk about your future." But the future Arthur Sterling had in mind was bigger, wilder, and more terrifying than anything Mia Rossi could have ever dared to imagine. Arthur opened the thick folder on his desk, the crisp sound of paper echoing in the silent, cavernous office. He studied its contents for a long moment, his face unreadable. Through the panoramic window behind him, Mia could see the city sprawling out to the horizon, a concrete jungle of infinite possibility that had always been locked away from her. "Amelia," Arthur began, his voice imbued with the quiet authority of a man who had moved markets and toppled competitors for half a century. "In 50 years of building this company, I've learned one fundamental truth. The most important assets aren't on the balance sheet. They're not patents or properties. The most important asset is character, and it's the rarest commodity on earth." He leaned forward, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "Yesterday, you made a choice. In that single moment on that train platform, you revealed more about who you are than 1,000 resumes or 100 interviews ever could. You didn't help Arthur Sterling, the founder of Sterling Dynamics. You helped Arthur, a scared old man who was alone and in pain. That kind of integrity, that kind of raw humanity, it's almost extinct in this world." Mia's hands, clasped tightly in her lap, were trembling. "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate that, I really do, but I just did what I hope anyone would do." "And that," Arthur said with a grim smile, "is exactly my point. You don't even realize how extraordinary your actions were. Which brings me to the reason you are sitting in that chair." He closed the folder with a soft, decisive thud and looked directly at her. "I'm not offering you the administrative assistant position." Mia's heart, which had been tentatively soaring, crashed back to earth. Of course, it was all a test, a thank you, but she wasn't qualified. She was just the girl from Queens who served coffee. She started to push herself up from the chair, the familiar taste of disappointment flooding her mouth. "I understand. I'm offering you something infinitely better," Arthur continued, gesturing for her to sit back down. Julian stepped forward, placing a new, even thicker folder on the desk in front of her. "Amelia, how would you feel about becoming my father's special advisor?" The words didn't register. They were just sounds. I'm sorry, what?" Arthur chuckled. "It's a real position, I assure you. I may be chairman emeritus, but I still oversee the company's long-term strategic direction, our philanthropic foundation, our community outreach. It's a lot to manage. I need someone by my side whom I can trust implicitly, someone with unimpeachable judgment, someone who sees people, not just profit margins." But I have no experience," Mia stammered. "I serve coffee and I clean offices. I don't know anything about corporate strategy or philanthropy." "Experience can be taught," Arthur interrupted, his voice sharp as steel. "Character cannot. You have already passed the only test that matters. You have integrity. You have empathy. In this company right now, that makes you more valuable than a whole army of Wharton MBAs." Julian opened the new folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the vast expanse of the mahogany desk. It was an offer letter. At the top, it read, "Position, Special Advisor to the Chairman." And then, the salary. Mia's eyes scanned the number, and she was sure she was hallucinating. $150,000, annually, with a signing bonus, full medical, dental, and vision insurance, a 401k matching program. It was a language from another planet. "There's more," Arthur said gently, seeing the look of stunned disbelief on her face. "I understand you have a younger brother, Leo. He's studying chemistry at a community college." "Yes, but how did you—" "You told me about him yesterday," Arthur said, his expression softening. "You told me how brilliant he is. You told me about the sacrifices you've made to give him a chance at a future. I had my foundation look into his academic record this morning. He's not just brilliant, Amelia. He's exceptional." Arthur's eyes twinkled. "I've taken the liberty of establishing the Sterling Foundation's new Pioneer Scholarship. It will provide a full 4-year scholarship for your brother, Leo Rossi, to attend the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, his dream school. It covers tuition, room, board, and includes a research stipend." The room began to swim. This couldn't be real. That's impossible. Scholarships like that are valued at approximately $400,000, Julian confirmed, his voice matter of fact. More if he chooses to pursue the doctorate in biochemistry that his professors believe he is capable of. The dam broke. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, began streaming down Mia's face. Tears of shock, of relief, of a lifetime of struggle and fear finally being released. "I don't understand," she sobbed. "Why? Why would you do all of this?" Arthur stood up, walked around the massive desk, and sat in the chair next to her, closing the distance between them, shedding the role of Titan and becoming just a man. "Amelia, let me tell you something I've learned about wealth. Money is a tool. It can build walls or it can build bridges. For too long, I've been building walls. Yesterday, you reminded me what it feels like to build a bridge." He paused, his gaze drifting to the city below. I clawed my way up from nothing. I built this entire company with my bare hands. I've made more money than my great-grandchildren could ever spend. But somewhere along the way, I lost a piece of myself. I started making decisions based on share price instead of shared humanity. I've walked past people who needed help because I was too obsessed with my next deal. He turned back to her, his eyes shining with a newfound conviction. Watching you yesterday, seeing you choose compassion over self-interest without a moment's hesitation, it reminded me of the man I wanted to be when I started this whole thing. The man who wanted to build something that mattered, not just something that was big. He leaned closer. I don't just want an employee, Amelia. I want a partner, a conscience, someone who will help me steer this giant ship back to the right course, someone who can help me ensure that Sterling Dynamics starts building bridges again. But I'm a nobody, Mia whispered through her tears. I'm just a girl from Queens. What could I possibly offer a company like this? You offer a perspective that all my billions can't buy, Arthur said firmly. You understand what it's like to be invisible. You understand what it means to struggle, to sacrifice, to put someone else's needs before your own. Those aren't weaknesses, Amelia. In the world we're trying to build, those are superpowers. Julian nodded in agreement. Some of our biggest failures as a company have come from being disconnected from the realities of the people we're supposed to serve. We need your voice in this building. Arthur reached into a drawer and pulled out another document. It was a check. One last thing. This is your first 2-month salary in advance. I imagine starting a new life comes with some expenses. Professional attire, and perhaps a new apartment. A place where your brother doesn't have to sleep on the couch. Mia couldn't speak. The generosity was so profound, so overwhelming, it felt like a physical force. Is any of this real? She finally managed to ask. It's very real, Arthur confirmed. But I need you to understand something. This is not charity. It's an investment. I'm investing in you because I believe you are exactly the kind of person this company needs to survive and to thrive in the 21st century. He leaned forward, his expression intense. But this offer comes with immense responsibility. I am going to teach you everything I know. You're going to learn about finance, strategy, and global markets. It will not be easy. I will demand excellence from you every single day. I won't let you down, Mia said, a new strength hardening her voice. I know you won't, Arthur replied. Because yesterday, when everything was on the line, you already proved that you will always choose to do what is right over what is easy. He stood and extended his hand. So, Amelia Rossi, are you ready to change the world? Through her tears, Mia stood and took his hand. The handshake was firm, a seal on a new reality. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I am. What neither of them knew was that the ripple effects of Mia's single act of kindness were about to spread far beyond the walls of Sterling Dynamics, setting in motion a revolution of compassion that would surprise everyone. 6 months later, the world was a different color. The gray, grinding struggle of Mia's old life had been replaced by a vibrant, hopeful, new reality. The cramped, roach-infested apartment in Queens was a distant memory, replaced by a bright, spacious 2-bedroom on the Upper West Side, with a doorman named Frank who always had a smile for her. Leo had his own room, a real room with a door, filled with shelves of brand-new chemistry books and a powerful laptop. He was thriving at MIT, his genius finally unleashed, already making a name for himself in the undergraduate research program. Good morning, Mr. Sterling, Mia said, striding into Arthur's penthouse office. She wore a sharp, tailored blazer, her confidence as much a part of her uniform as the tablet in her hand containing his morning briefing. Amelia, if you call me Mr. Sterling one more time, I'm going to start calling you Your Excellency, he grumbled from behind his desk, but a wide smile betrayed his feigned annoyance. Old habits die hard, Arthur, she grinned back. Their relationship had blossomed into a powerful partnership. Arthur, true to his word, had become her mentor, tutoring her in the complex languages of finance and corporate law. But Mia, in turn, had become his teacher. She brought a perspective, a grounding in reality, that had been missing from the rarefied air of the C-suite for decades. "The Sterling Cares Quarterly Impact Report," Mia announced, taking her seat opposite him. "Prepare to be amazed." "Hit me," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The Amelia Rossi First Step Initiative has provided job training and placement for 212 formerly homeless individuals in the last 6 months. Our Bridge to Education Scholarship Fund has awarded 73 full college scholarships to kids from low-income neighborhoods, and our new employee volunteer program has logged over 25,000 hours of community service." Arthur shook his head, a look of genuine awe on his face. "When I hired an advisor, I thought I was getting a conscience. I had no idea I was hiring a revolutionary." The First Step and Bridge to Education initiatives had been Mia's creations, born from a simple, radical idea that what struggling people needed wasn't a handout, but a hand up. Not just charity, but a tangible opportunity to reclaim their dignity. "The New York Times wants to do a feature story on the cultural shift here," Mia continued. "They're calling our Humanity First corporate policy a new model for compassionate capitalism." The media attention had been a slow burn. It started with a viral video, the one the teenager had filmed at Grand Central. That led to a local news story. But what made the story stick wasn't the fairy tale rescue. It was what Arthur and Mia did next. They codified kindness. Arthur, at Mia's urging, had implemented a company-wide policy. No employee would ever be penalized for being late or missing a meeting if they were stopping to help someone in need. They partnered with community shelters, offering not just funding, but mentorship. They started hosting free financial literacy workshops in underserved communities. "Do you remember when you had to take 3 different trains to get to your cleaning job?" Arthur asked, his voice soft. "You mean 7 months ago?" She laughed. "And now you're presenting multi-million-dollar philanthropic proposals to the board of directors like you were born to do it." Arthur's mentorship had awakened a fierce intelligence and a strategic mind Mia never knew she possessed. She had a unique gift for seeing the human connection in a spreadsheet, for understanding the real-world needs behind the data. "Speaking of the board," Mia said, a proud smile spreading across her face, "I have some news. They voted this morning. They've offered me a position, director of the Sterling Foundation." Arthur's face broke into a grin so wide it seemed to crack his normally stoic facade. "Outstanding. It's about damn time someone was running that foundation who actually understands the communities we're supposed to be serving." The promotion was just one of the countless ripples. Leo had been featured in MIT's Alumni magazine as a shining example of untapped potential. The Daily Grind Cafe, Sal's Greasy Spoon, had landed the exclusive catering contract for all of Sterling Dynamics' New York offices, allowing Sal to hire 5 new employees from the neighborhood and finally give himself a raise. But perhaps the most profound change was in Arthur himself. "You know what's funny?" he said, staring out the window at the city he had conquered. "For 40 years, I rode around this city in the back of a town car, sealed behind tinted glass. I never even looked at the people on the sidewalks. Now, I take the subway twice a week, just to feel the pulse of the city again." "And how's that working out for you?" Mia asked. "Last week I helped a young woman carry her stroller up the stairs at the Times Square station. A small thing. But it felt important. It felt real." Kindness is contagious, Arthur. "The Wharton Business Review wants to do a cover story," he said, changing the subject. "They want to analyze the Sterling model and its impact on employee retention and productivity. Turns out treating people like human beings is actually good for the bottom line." "Who knew?" They both laughed, a shared, easy sound. But beneath the laughter, Mia felt a deep, resonant satisfaction. Her one small act had started a fire, a movement that was spreading beyond the walls of this single company. "Arthur," she said quietly, "do you ever think about that day at Grand Central?" "Every single morning when I open my eyes," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "It was the best day of my life." "Even though you almost died?" "Especially because I almost died," he said, turning to look at her, his eyes filled with a paternal affection that went far beyond that of an employer. "It brought you into my life, and it reminded me what my life was supposed to be about." Outside, the city churned on. But somewhere in that sprawling metropolis, 73 students were sitting in college classrooms they never thought they'd enter. Over 200 people had a safe place to sleep and a steady job. And thousands of employees felt empowered to look up from their phones and see the humanity around them. All because one woman, with nothing to her name, chose to miss her train. 2 years later, Grand Central Terminal. Rush hour. The scene was the same, a swirling vortex of human motion. But this time, the woman hurrying across the concourse was not the desperate, terrified Mia Rossi of the past. This was Amelia Rossi, director of the Sterling Foundation, a confident, poised woman on her way to catch a train. She checked her watch. 3:15 p.m. A board meeting had run late, but if she hurried, she could just make the 3:20 to Harlem, where she was the keynote speaker at the graduation ceremony for the newest class of the First Step Job Training Initiative. As she rushed toward the platform, she saw him, an elderly man, sitting hunched on the very same wooden bench where she had found Arthur 2 years ago. He was clutching a simple, hand-drawn card, and tears were streaming down his weathered face. His clothes were clean but worn, and he kept looking around, utterly lost in the roaring river of people. Mia slowed. The train was boarding. 200 graduates were waiting to hear a message of hope, a message she was uniquely qualified to deliver. But something in the man's quiet despair stopped her cold. She walked over. "Sir, are you all right?" The man looked up, his eyes clouded with confusion but shining with a profound, overwhelming joy. "My daughter," he said, his voice thick with a Spanish accent. "She graduates today from a special program. They taught her computers, gave her a new life." He gestured with the card. "But I do not know how to find this place." Mia glanced at the card. On it, a child had drawn a picture of a smiling woman in a cap and gown. Above it, in careful block letters, it read, "Sterling Care's First Step Initiative Graduation Ceremony." Her heart stopped. She knew the program. She had designed it. "What's your daughter's name?" she asked, her voice soft. "Sophia. Sophia Ramirez." The name hit her with the force of a memory. Sophia Ramirez, a single mother of 2. Mia had personally reviewed her application. She remembered the essay about escaping an abusive relationship and wanting to build a better life for her children. "Sir," Mia said gently, a warm smile spreading across her face, "I know exactly where you need to go, and I know your daughter Sophia. She's one of our brightest stars." The man's face lit up. "You know my Sophia?" Mia pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to her assistant, canceling the speech. Then she hailed a taxi. "Come with me," she said, helping the man to his feet. "Let's go get you to your daughter's graduation." During the ride uptown, she learned his name was Hector, that he worked as a dishwasher, and that he had watched his daughter suffer for years, feeling helpless. Today, he told her, was the first day of his family's new life. At the ceremony, Mia didn't just drop him off. She escorted him inside, found him the best seat in the front row, and sat down beside him. When Sophia Ramirez's name was called, The woman walked across the stage, her face radiant with a pride and confidence that had been hard-won. As she accepted her certificate, her eyes found her father in the crowd, and then she saw Mia sitting next to him. Her eyes widened and then filled with tears of gratitude. As the crowd erupted in applause, Hector gripped Mia's hand, his own tears flowing freely. "Thank you," he whispered. "Not just for the ride, for everything, for seeing my daughter when no one else would." Later that evening, on the train back downtown, Mia thought about the beautiful, perfect symmetry of kindness. 2 years ago, she had missed her future to help a stranger. Today, she had missed an appointment to help another. Her phone buzzed. A text from Arthur. "My assistant told me you missed the speech. She also told me why. Some things never change, and thank God for that." The next morning, Arthur Sterling announced a new, permanent addition to the company's official charter, to be known as the Amelia Rossi Principle. It stated that at Sterling Dynamics, human decency would always take precedence over punctuality, because they had learned a powerful lesson. The most important meetings are rarely the ones on your calendar. They're the unexpected moments when life asks you to stop, to look up, and to help. One missed train, one simple choice, one life changed forever. In a world that tells us to be ruthless, to be ambitious, to always look out for number one, Amelia Rossi showed us a different path. She proved that our greatest strength isn't our ambition, it's our humanity. That kindness isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. Arthur was right. Kindness is contagious. From one woman's courageous decision, we saw a ripple effect that transformed a multi-billion-dollar corporation, launched hundreds of careers, and sparked a movement that is redefining what it means to be successful. But here's the most important part of this story. It's not just about Mia. Every single day, you are presented with a choice. At the train station, in the grocery store, in your own office. You have the opportunity to change someone's world with a simple act of compassion. So, what will your choice be? Have you ever stopped to help a stranger when you were in a hurry? Share your story in the comments below. I want to hear them. I want us all to hear them. And if this story restored even a tiny piece of your faith in humanity, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove a little bit of good can change everything, because you never know. The person whose life you save just might be your own.